It's a pleasure to be here in front of you all. So I don't know if I'm going to be as eloquent as Dan was, but I'll do my best. I think he did a great job in terms of identifying some of the core challenges that we have, especially given in the Semitic regions of the world. But I'm going to talk about Islam, and to start off, I'm going to do a greeting. In the Muslim tradition, as well as in the Arabic language, from which a lot of the Islamic beliefs come from. Islam was born just like Judaism and Christianity in the Semitic world. And this religion in the Semitic world was the canvas upon which all of our religions that we are trying to share here outside of Buddhism were born from. So the greeting is Assalamu alaikum, very similar to Shalom, as you could see. Assalamu alaikum means, and you would say, Wa alaikum assalam, right? Wa alaikum assalam. And this is a greeting that every Muslim would use with another Muslim, whether they were a stranger on the street or their beloved. And it literally means peace be upon you. So every Muslim greets another to say, and their greeting starts with peace. And in fact, the word Islam itself is rooted in the Arabic word silm, which means peace. But peace is an interesting concept in Islam. It is, again, grounded in the Semitic world. Peace is not necessarily an absence of conflict, because there's an understanding that there is conflict, there's friction in the world. And sometimes through conflict and friction, beautiful things can be born. However, within the context of conflict, in Islam, peace is about harmony. It's about a bringing together of people in a harmonious, non-discordant way, where people can live amongst each other in a way that fosters peace. But knowing that people will have different opinions, knowing that people will have a different perspective, knowing that people may have actually different religions within that space. So this brings me to another very important point that I wanted to bring up today, because it's something that has been proselytized generally through media, and I want to cover it. Because in the polarity of peace, the polar position of peace is war. And Dan really brought up some excellent points about Dan, right? Am I right about Dan? I'll let you. Brought up some really specific points, and I'm not going to get too specific here, but I think mine is a really great segue from what he spoke about. Because both of these religions that coexist within Israel and within that Semitic world are about peace. And so I'm going to cover jihad. And this is this really potent word. And in the European context, whether through media, whether through historical documentation, the Islamic world has been sort of connected with jihadic war. However, in the true Islam, in the Quran, in the Hadith, which is the writings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, jihad, there's two forms of jihad. The first form of jihad, the greater jihad that's called, is actually all about spiritual attainment. It's about faith. It's about actual dealing with your own challenges, with your struggle. So the core word of jihad is actually struggle, and has very little to do with war. It's about struggle, and we all are going through struggles. I mean, during COVID, geez, it's a year and a half of tremendous struggle. So for the Muslim, this is the COVID experience is the jihad. really the ultimate jihad of our time. And it's a struggle to stay connected with the people that you love, to have faith. And in fact, the core meaning of jihad is actually about social justice, which is in our times probably one of the most important cultural motions, social justice, because there is really a big lack of it. And so that greater jihad in Islam is about social justice, about justice for all. Yeah. But there is a lesser jihad, the secondary jihad, which is associated and which really Dan spoke very eloquently about, which is about the fight against oppression. And sometimes you do have to take up arms against oppression. If your loved ones are suffering, if your people are suffering, if your religion is under attack, and this attack may be through media or it may be physical. If you are under attack through the second form of jihad, you have an obligation to protect yourself. And so maybe that's what we feel around the world, right? However, nowhere in this concept of jihad is there room for aggression, right? Is that no war of aggression. Nowhere in Islam is there a war of aggression or a war for gain, whether that's personal gain, national gain. There is no concept of that in Islam. Because in Islam, another concept really important is the concept of multiplicity. There is no belief in forced conversion in Islam. In fact, Islam has no concept of mission either. And it's in cardinal principle, Islam is a culture of peace through acceptance of religious faith as completely an option. Absolutely optional in Islam. There is no concept of conversion by force or conversion by propaganda even, right? Because propaganda can be a forceful way of converting. And so no compulsion. In fact, it is written in the Quran, no Muslim can compel another person to become Muslim. In fact, that is a form of sin, looked very poorly upon. That brings me to a story that I wanted to tell. This is the story of Saladin. People familiar who Saladin was? So Saladin was the general or sultan of Egypt, and him and Richard Lionheart had a very interesting relationship. This was the Second Crusade, the end of the Second Crusade. And this is interesting, right? I'm bringing up a point of conflict, which again, as I go back to my first point, the absence of conflict is not the way Islam, any Semitic peoples look at peace. So the story of Saladin is that he had conquered Jerusalem. Plain and simple, 1187 AD, at the end of the Second Crusade, was a war between Saladin and Richard, who was the king of England. And much of that war was a lot of bloodshed. However, when Saladin had amassed the greatest army, Muslim army anyway, in the history of Islam, and marched on Jerusalem, at some point, knowing his adversary, Richard, and having this tremendous respect for each other, they had a very interesting relationship. He took the city by diplomacy instead. And he looked at that as a function of his highest attainment, that greater jihad that I spoke of, connecting back. And when you look at the readings of Saladin in his personal journals, he had seen that his only way, if he was to take a city so sacred, so beloved as Jerusalem, and in the concepts of multiplicity and acceptance of the Christian, the Jew, he could not take that city in any good conscience through killing everybody there. And so, they took it through diplomacy. And when he entered the city as a conqueror, he proclaimed in that very moment that no Muslim soldier would destroy a church or a synagogue. In fact, in his writings, in his proclamations, in his agreement, he said all religions must be working together. And this is that concept of multiplicity in Islam, that there is no place. You and your religion have just as much place as me and my religion, and I have no purpose, no good purpose in trying to get you to become a Muslim. And in that cardinal sense of no compulsion is the way Islam reflects peace in the world. So, in closing, at its heart, Islam is about peace. But as we know in the world that we live in, religion sometimes is used in ways that are not necessarily at its core principle. However, as communities, as individuals here, we are here in peace, and I'm here in peace, and we can operate together in harmony, but have some great conversations that may have some conflict in it. So, thank you. Handing over to Cliff.